politics. Then you find out that it sneaks up on you and politics has everything to do with you. So I didn't carry a lot of legislation, as the Appropriations Committee is kind of the workhorse committee of the legislature. We probably put in the most hours of anybody, but I found it a very appealing and good place for me because I am a farmer and rancher and long hours don't bother me much. Speaker Hansen here had set an aggressive goal for us at the beginning of the legislative session to produce the G bill, which is the comprehensive budget bill for state government, by the 35th legislative day, which has never been accomplished before. And I'm proud to say that we did in fact accomplish that. Part of the philosophy behind that was that it's such a long bill to read, and it was always usually produced on the last day of session, and nobody had time to review it. Well, being we had it done 2 days early, everybody was able to review it. It passed overwhelmingly, and we were able to reinstall some of the important cuts for libraries in South Dakota Public Broadcasting. And so, without any further ado, I will pass it to Karla here.
All right, so what's the question?
The battle for property rights, anything else you wish to tell her?
Karla, take it back to the beginning of where you got involved.
Okay, so I mean, I've spoke to you guys before. Many of you know the story. I ended up getting into politics because, well, I was already involved in my county. Okay, so I was involved in the county GOP, doing the dinners, doing a lot of the things that probably some of you do. And there was an open seat in my district, so that's where I thought, I'm gonna run for that seat. And I talked to my husband, and he gave me the green light and the thumbs up. And so it was during that process that this whole thing began with Summit Carbon Solutions and Navigator Heartland Greenway. And I got the letter in the mail. And so it wasn't because of property rights that I got involved. It was because I was concerned about our country, about where we were heading at the time, and even some of the things that were happening in our state. And so again, kind of midstream, I was hit with this property rights issue. Now, many times we are painted, all of us sitting up here, as we are anti-agriculture. Well, we have a farmer sitting here. I come from a farm background. Amanda's from a farm background. His in-laws are farmers. So that's not true. We're tagged anti-ethanol. Again, not true. My family has a history of ethanol. Mark delivers corn to the ethanol plant. So it's about property rights. At the end of the day, it's about not taking property for something that is not public use. And we see the danger of that because if we go there, I saw it as this is going to be the first domino to fall, and then it's just going to be one thing after another after that. So that's why this fight was so very important to me. Obviously, we've been in it now for a number of years, and brought several bills in the last 2 years. But this year, we finally got House Bill 1052 because it was the right thing to do. We got it across the finish line. And I will just say that, I like to say, it was my bill, and Mark carried it in the Senate, but it really was the people's bill. It was about them. It was because we got this done because the force of the people coming behind us and pushing this thing across the finish line, because everybody was on notice, right? This was the issue. This needed to be dealt with. There were many legislators that lost their seats last time around because of this issue. And I'm thankful to Governor Roden that he did sign the bill and that it's law. And I will just say there's a lot of other states that are looking to us right now because we led on this issue. And we're going to continue to lead in other areas as well. And so I just want to thank you so much for having us here tonight.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see a lot of friendly faces once again. My name is Jon Hansen. I'm from Del Rapids. I'm the Speaker of the House. And yeah, on this, backing up a little bit, I got into politics, a while back now. And I mostly got in because of the life issue. Very pro-life. And as many of you know, because you were with us on the fight, we recently just defeated Constitutional Amendment G, which was amazing. Praise the Lord for that. But along the way, when you're in the state legislature, you get involved in these other fights, of course. And on this one in particular, on the property rights issue, boy, I just remember early on starting to read news stories about what was going on and kind of just hearing things sort of on the periphery. And then I started looking into it a little more, and I thought, wow, well that just seems totally wrong, that they're gonna try to come in here and use eminent domain to take these people's land, whether they want it or not, to put this, what's a risky pipeline on their property. And so I did a little more research. I wrote a newspaper column about it, and I got a lot of feedback on that, actually, more than I thought, really. There was a lot more people paying attention to it than I even knew before I started talking more about it. Well, then we got into legislative session, and Karla brought the first bill that we had on the subject. And so, at this point, we're kind of all in. And that bill goes down. And our little first attempt at fixing this legislatively went down. And so we're just hanging out at the end of session. We're like, okay, well, now what? And we sort of collectively concluded that more people need to know about this, because we were just so convinced that the more people know and learn about what's going on, the more they're going to reject this, because it's just awful. And so, we kind of went on a frenzy trying to just tell everybody we could about what was happening to these people. And you hear some of the stories. This company would go to landowners on their 4th or 5th generation ground, and they'd have a little conversation. At the end of the conversation, the landowner would be met with this agent saying, okay, you know what, we're gonna put this pipeline across your ground whether you like it or not. And that was like the ending message. And to me, and to a lot of other people obviously in this state, that's not how we do business. That's not how we treat our fellow South Dakotans. And so from there on, it's just been a groundswell of people from all over the state. And that was one thing about this too, is we just weren't sure, is this just gonna be a regional thing, by the people who are only affected? Not at all, not at all. And God bless all the South Dakotans from all across the state. You saw it on Referred Law 21, who could look at this and just say, no, that's not right. We're not gonna treat people like that. And we're gonna do things differently. We're gonna get back to how our neighbors treat our neighbors in South Dakota. And it's just been incredible to be a part of that, and to see all the people really just rise up in defense of their God-given private property rights. And that all culminated this year with really an incredible win on House Bill 1052. And it was special to be a part of that process. For me, it was also special to watch Mark pitch that bill on the floor. Yeah. Having met him way back in the day in Leola or whatever, where we first met, I can't even remember. And like he was saying, this guy had no interest in getting involved in politics whatsoever. But they chose the wrong community. They chose the wrong states in this way. And so to see Mark go from, the guy I first met to the guy who's pitching that bill on the floor and getting across the finish line was incredible. And it's a testament to the people of this state and what they'll do to defend their own liberties, but also their neighbors when they need. And so this has been really incredible.
So my name's Amanda Radke. I'm from Mitchell, South Dakota. I'm a farmer, rancher, and entrepreneur who spent my career kind of focusing on agricultural policy, especially on a national level, fighting animal rights activists and environmental extremists who I saw chipping away at our ability to own and manage our land and our livestock as we see fit. And it took me maybe up until this pipeline fight to really piece it all together, that they might have been talking about climate change, or they might have been talking about animal welfare, but when we boiled it down and we translated what these extremist groups were doing, is they were attacking our private property. And whether you live in Sioux Falls or you live in Kadoka, your land, your backyard, the clothing on your back, the car that you own, it is yours. And we do not sacrifice our God-given, constitutionally protected private property rights. We do not sacrifice the rights of the individual for an economic development project that quite frankly is funded by taxpayer dollars and is the Green New Deal. And I think South Dakota has largely rejected that in a big way from every corner of the state. And how I got involved in this is I had a lady named Rita Brown call me, an elderly woman who was approached by this company, and they were basically told her, sign this easement or we'll put the pipeline wherever we want, no matter what you say. And she had called me and tearfully told me her story. Then she introduced me to Mark here, who was quite literally in the epicenter of this. I just kind of started piecing this together, paying attention to this, and just kind of horrified that this would be happening in South Dakota of all places. And then I had the chance to meet these two wonderful people. And if I can brag on them a little bit, I was at a meeting in Canton, South Dakota, and they were both there. It was standing room only. And a lot of times I felt like, man, am I alone in the way I feel about this project, about private property rights? Like, does South Dakota believe the same things I fundamentally believe in? And in this fight, I found that to be true. And so I saw Karla Lems face the giants, and she didn't tremble in her voice at all. She just kept taking the arrows, and she's taken a lot of arrows in here on our behalf. I saw Jon Hansen debate a navigator, and in that debate, he called this out for being the boondoggle that it is. And that company packed up its bags. I think they left crying after they debated Representative Hansen. You can give him a round of applause for that. That was awesome. And I saw for the last 3 years these champions bring these bills and face the biggest lobbyists, the biggest corporations, and not blink. Just keep showing up. And there was a lot of learning, there was a lot of humility, a lot of tears and sacrifice. And the other thing I think, as we got to the finish line on 1052, and what a monumental day that was, that we can finally, in the state of South Dakota, say no eminent domain for carbon pipelines. You want to build your project, go pitch it to the landowners, tell them how great it is, sell it, make a deal, shake hands, have that easement signed. But if a landowner wants to say, hey, my land is my business, this is my opportunity at the American dream, and I have better plans for it than this, we should be able to say no thank you too. And so getting to the finish line on this and looking at what's ahead, I think this is just the stepping stone. I think we have South Dakotans activated and paying attention on a whole host of issues. And the reason I think we've been successful to this point, and I've prayed on it a lot, is I really think it's been the hand of God and the hearts of patriots. And that's where we're at today. And so I kind of want to set it up now. I just want to ask these three some questions and let them kind of talk about their vision of what's next, where the fight is, and how we can activate every South Dakotan to take advantage of this momentum that we have to participate in their government, to hold elected officials accountable, and actually have a government that serves we the people. So to start, I want to ask Senator Lapka. We have this great bill. In the last week, we had some updates from Summit. What were some of the news items that came out, and where does that set the landowner movement today?
Well, I guess, the first thing that I'd like to make mention of, it was never anything of what we did. We were just the fortunate chosen ones that were able to speak for it, because probably one of the most wonderful things that I experienced in the entire process was the day that we heard 1052 in the Senate State Affairs Committee. There was over 150 South Dakotans that showed up and went through a Me Too line. A Me Too line was when they came in after the main testimony and stated their name, where they were from, and got to say that they were in favor of it too. That was probably the single greatest thing that I experienced, because it was people participating in their government, and that's what it's supposed to be. The people by, or the government for the people and by the people. And I can't tell you or explain how that makes you feel. I was so proud that day to be a South Dakotan. Then the day that we were able to get it off of the Senate floor, that was an arena that we had never been in before. And to do it in the overwhelming manner that we did really spoke volumes to the will of the South Dakotans that stood up and did that. And then when the governor signed it and it became a reality, You know, I really felt like the burden of the last few years was lifted. And I received so many phone calls, text messages, emails. I had over 1,200 emails thanking me on my legislative account. And it just, again, so much pride welled up within inside of me because it made a difference in people's lives. And now that they can just go about and enjoy their freedoms and liberty like our government was established and intended for them to do. And in response to that, the Summit Project paused their PUC hearings in here while they regroup and evaluate what to do. What that's going to look like remains to be seen. But the bottom line, that was always the focus here, was our constitutional rights. If we didn't protect those constitutional rights, every other one could be at risk. And so it just, again, with a great, or an immense amount of pride, congratulations, South Dakota.
So, no, that's okay. So Representative Lems, our Speaker Pro Tem, and I think she did an incredible job in so many arenas in Pierre this legislative session, but yeah, give her a round of applause. Now, Karla, there were some bills that we were able to stop, that you were kind of at the forefront of. Two examples I can think of, SB 198, also HB 1261. So both of those were kind of pipeline related. Could you speak to maybe the defense that you guys were undertaking behind the scenes that maybe avoided catastrophe if those had passed?
Well, okay, SB 198.
That was Mel Hoff's
Oh, yes.
mediation bill.
Yes, okay, so there was there were so many bills. Yes, so there was a mediation bill. Basically, in my mind, the first time I read the bill, I was like, this is forcing mediation. So if somebody came on your land, that it was gonna force you to basically have a conversation with them. So technically, it didn't force you to do that, but basically it was saying, if you don't, then if we end up going to court with you, we're going to be able to bring all of this evidence before the judge to say, well, we tried to meet with these people, but they refused to meet with us. So basically, it's putting you right away on the wrong foot with the judge, right? Because the judge is like, okay, you're in here, you're taking up time in my courtroom, you're not even, meeting with these people, so right away you have a black mark, right? So we were able to go on defense on that and win the day. And also on HB 1261 was a bill that basically was a carve-out bill, and that's what we were told it was going to be for. It was a bill on counties basically able to override townships with things that were going to be going in a ditch, like a manure line, things like that. And sometimes, and I don't want to paint a picture that I'm against CAFOs or anything like that. My family actually owned a feedlot, and I know it is very difficult sometimes to work with neighbors on things, to work with townships, this and that. But we don't want to set a precedent statewide for something that may be happening to one or two areas. So we always have to be very careful with that. We also saw in the bill that it used the language operate and construct. And that just kind of gave us a red flag to say this could actually be for more things than just a dairy or a hog facility using manure lines in a ditch. Could it be for a prison using a sewer line to run for like 14 miles? Could it be for a pipeline that all of a sudden they can go through a ditch instead of having to come, across a field? So again, we were able to bring those things out with HB 1261 and able to stop that bill. And where I thought you were going to go was, and this is kind of off topic for this, but I thought she was going to go to the prison. And so I'll just touch on that very briefly. That was Bill 1025, and we were able to stop that in the House. Just being able to say, hold on, we need to pump the brakes on this. This is $1 billion project. That South Dakota even afford this at this point in time? And so Right now, that has been paused. We're going to be studying that some more this summer. You'll hear about the task force coming up. But anyway, that was another big defensive move for us. So.
No, that's all right.
I should be in the middle probably, but so Speaker of the House Jon Hansen, there's been a lot of victories that's happened in the last year. You've been kind of in the middle of all of them. I would like, just before we talk about the legislative session, that would be my second question, is to talk about some of the achievements of this session beyond the property rights discussion. But first, could you walk everybody through kind of how this pipeline discussion led to the primaries, led to the leadership change, led to RL 21, led to the GOP leadership change? Walk us through some of those victories, because to me it's just an avalanche of the people speaking loudly and responding, and it's kind of brought us to today.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't be prouder of how much the people have just stood up and spoken. Particularly when their backs are up against the wall on something like this pipeline issue. And we've seen it over the last, 3 years, I guess now. But as more and more people, like I was saying earlier, as more and more people learned about this, more and more people were stepping up at every level, whether that was at their local government or at their legislature or on the ballot with RL 21. And so what we saw over the last couple of years was a legislature that wasn't being responsive to the will of the people, period. It just wasn't. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that was the case. And so you saw that pent-up energy build up for a number of years, and that has had a significant ripple effect throughout this entire state, really. And you saw it beginning in the legislative primaries, where there were a number of incumbents, 14 or something like that were ousted. And primarily, and if you ask some of them, they'll be straight up with you, it was because they voted wrong on Senate Bill 201. I think Senator Hunoff down in Yankton is on record as saying that. She voted yes on Senate Bill 201, and she wasn't reelected because of that. And that was the case across the state of South Dakota. And so you just saw people responding to that. Well, all right, now you got a new crop of freedom-minded legislators through the primary. That played out through the general election, where those people ended up winning their seats. You saw RL 21 go the way it should have, and Senate Bill 201 was rejected by the people. And then we come into legislative session, do leadership elections, and with some exceptions, the leadership is basically completely pro-landowner rights at this point. And they were almost exactly the opposite for the last 2 years. And again, that's just a consequence of the people stepping up. And then you fast forward a little further, our Republican Party just had our leadership elections, and now our leadership is filled with people who have been responsive to the people of this state and said no to eminent domain for this carbon sequestration pipeline. And that movement is really, by modern, at least in my memory, quite unprecedented. I mean, you just don't see that happen every day. And it's really, once again, it's a testament to the people of this state, and it's not going away. I think once you awaken that sleeping giant, it's not going back to sleep for a long time. And so we're going to continue to see people who step up, and in whatever fashion that is for them, whatever God's calling them to do, whether that's just to go to the polls and vote, or whether that's to write a letter, or whether that's to run for this office or that office, but that's just going to continue, because it's on. At this point, it's just on. You are not going to put the genie back in the bottle. The people who are dedicated to putting the people of this state first over that big money corporate interest, they're here, and they're in charge, and they're not going away. And so we're just going to continue to see that play out over the course of the next 2, 4, 6 years and beyond, hopefully. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing for this state. In many ways, there's blessings in all of these things. The fact that I got to meet Mark and Amanda and all of these patriots. That's a blessing that's come out of all of this, and I think a lot of people feel that way who have been affected by this pipeline. And having a bit of a shock to the system in this state, I think is a good thing. And I think you're gonna see more and more people at all different levels, starting with the people of this state and their elected representatives, who are going to say, now we're gonna take the side of that individual and that family first. We're gonna look out for what's best for them over what's best for the next out-of-state foreign-backed company who's gonna try to come in and take our property and use it whether we like it or not. So it's a great thing for the state.
Could I just add one thing really quick? I know this mic's kind of going in and out, but one thing that I saw that happened, we're talking about this movement of people, and what happened because of, I think the impetus was the pipeline fight, but what it did was it started to engage people, and they started to pay attention, and they started to listen to the sessions in Pierre, or they started to attend a county commission meeting or whatever, and then they started to see there's more issues than just this that's going on that we are concerned about. And when we go to Pierre, we're seeing that there is an attitude with some legislators toward constituents or towards the people that we don't like. Because all of a sudden, and I said this because I saw it one of the first years I was in Pierre, I said, it's like they're rolling out the red carpet for the lobbyists, but then when the people come to speak, they're looked down on. And I didn't like it. And I will just say, because we had a change in leadership in the legislature this year, and with Speaker Jon Hansen and some other really great leaders that were there, we were able to get new chairs of different committees. And I'm sure if any of you had come to testify this year versus the last 2 years that I was there at least, I hope that you were afforded respect, that you were heard, and maybe it doesn't even mean that your bill or whatever you're coming that always gets across the finish line, but we want to have a fair hearing. We want to hear from both sides, and we want to have everybody weigh in, and then let's go forward from there. But at the very least, we need to give respect to everyone who is coming.
I would, let's see if this one works. I would add that what Karla said is that it was eye-opening to me to get involved in this a few years ago and to go to Pierre and feel like you were looked at with disdain and disgust almost. Like, we're here to serve these big lobbyists that are bringing these big projects. Your business, your plans, your family don't really matter because you're small. And it really, taking a lot of beatings and going and testifying and losing over and over again and having to drive those long rides back to Mitchell, it can wear on a person. And what struck me with 1052 and watching the 31 minutes of Me Too's was just, there was grown men crying. I mean, there was people hugging. They were there. They had fought the good fight over and over and over again, and finally they were being listened to. What also struck me, because I did have one representative tell me the day we were there in the committee on the House side, when Representative Lems presented the bill, and he told me, "Straight to you today." And I said, well, that's fine, but I thought there's 200 people here, and before you've even heard what they have to say, you've already made up your mind. And I thought, what disdain that is. The other thing I thought was with 1052 and all those people having to be there, there's a bunch of people saying, not on our watch. So can you bring us back to those beginning days and how you even got started getting organized?
I don't know how much time we have, because there's a lot there, believe me, you. But I graduated high school. I went to college for about 1.5 years. At that time, my father told me that, Mark, I'm gonna need you to come back to the farm. We've taken on more work. There's more than I can handle by myself, or we're gonna have to downsize a little bit. Well, me being young and ambitious, I didn't want to see that happen, so I left college at that time, and I spent the next 20 years of my life just working. That's what I enjoy. That's what I love to do. Farming is what my passion is. Well, then all of a sudden, this company shows up, because all I wanted to do was be left alone and farm. Well, then this showed up, and all of a sudden I couldn't be left alone. And I was facing not being able to farm in the way that I seen fit. I always believed we had very solidified property rights within the state of South Dakota. Throughout this whole process, I learned that wasn't the case. Why'd that happen? Because we spend all of our time focused on our work, on our daily lives. And it got constructed over multiple years to put us all in that position via state law. And so that's when I started getting involved. It simply started by neighbors talking to neighbors. The companies would come out throughout the area telling you that 80% of your neighbors have signed. Well, I come from a very small, tight-knit community, and everybody knows everybody, so we'd start talking to anybody. Half of them had never even heard of these people. So that happened initially in the process. It led to meeting people in other towns as this was going clear across the state. Same thing was going on there. Eventually we started holding community meetings in multiple communities across the state, and people just started getting connected. And then we started contacting our legislators. I mean, how often have we been told in our life, you got a problem, contact your legislators, they'll take care of it. Well, they weren't listening to us. We showed up out in Pierre that first year and weren't able to get anything accomplished. We felt very disenfranchised by our government. So what did we start doing then? We started going home and participating in our local governments, which is probably the purest and best form of government that we have in this country, because it's the ones, I mean, you live every day with them. Your kids go to school together. You go to church together. And we were able, they would listen to us. And they started protecting the people that were within the area. And if I could just go back a little bit to, you know, while we were down in Pierre, that's probably what inspired me to run about as much as anybody. The first year that we were down in Pierre, there was lobbyists interviewed in the paper. We decided to have a lobby day. This is what the old guys did back in the old days, and we thought if it worked then, it'll work now. So we had about 50 of us farmers showed up down in Pierre. The next day in the paper, there was a lobbyist quoted in the paper saying that the farmers were breaking decorum of the House of Representatives by walking down the hallways in blue jeans and plaid shirts. Well, I thought that was very offensive because I think I could make the argument that we have more of a right to be there than they do. You know, again, it's a government for the people. And I participated in all those committee hearings. I don't know how many committee hearings that I sat in and testified at, and everybody up on the dais was always on their phone or looking down. And you just felt like they are not listening to us. I was up speaking at a convention in Bismarck, North Dakota last January, about the 25th of January. It was kind of blizzarding out. I got home at 12:30 in the morning where I live. Normally it's a 3-hour drive from where I live down to Pierre. Found out that night that there was one of the bills that was going to be heard in committee in the House of Representatives Commerce and Energy Committee. Nobody could get there. So I took off at about 5 a.m. with my father-in-law, got down there by about 8:30 and was able to testify on it. I just as well stayed home. It was all preordained. They didn't listen to you. And so I made it a commitment to myself that when I got into this, I'm going to give people the respect that they deserve. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to look them in the eyes. They took the time to show up when they shouldn't have to, because we're elected to be down there to represent them. And it's good to be held accountable, and I don't ever want to see that stop. And I've heard that as well, because just me being there on the inside this year, I felt like it was a different atmosphere. And I'm hoping that's something that we can grow on. And so that's where it all led up, of where I come from to where I'm sitting today. And looking back, I wouldn't have changed a thing.
So Speaker Hansen, you were a part of our, does this one sound okay or does it sound okay? You were a part of our landowner rallies. So for 3 years, and year 3 came around, and I know we had discussed behind the scenes, like, this is our last rally. We are tired of asking for the same thing over and over. But really, we asked for 3 things. We asked to maintain our private property rights, maintain local control, and no eminent domain for CO2 pipelines. And yet, you were part of this, and yet somehow the narrative was twisted. That, again, and Karla mentioned this, we were anti-agriculture, we were part of activist groups, or anti-ethanol, or corn farmer, and all those things kind of gave you, I don't know, I looked around, but I've been a farmer my whole life, so it was like, oh, I don't know who they're talking about, but they're saying these things about the people. I guess looking forward, your vision of South Dakota, agriculture being the #1 industry, what does the future of South Dakota look like for family farms and ranches, and how can we get back to that just fundamental, this is what South Dakota agriculture should look like?
Well, I think, a little bit about my background. So I grew up a city kid, was born in Yankton, moved to Del Rapids when I was pretty young. And then middle of high school, I met my girlfriend then, now wife, Sheila. And she's a Garrett. So if you know any Garretts, is from Del Rapids. They're a bunch of farmers. They raise cattle and do corn and beans. And they were milking cows for a long time too. So I got a lot of milking experience back in the day. Just so I'd go out to milk cows just so I could hang out with Sheila after I got out of school. So, agriculture is very much ingrained in our life and our family's life. And, the special thing that we've observed in our family is the ability for my father-in-law, Pat, to pass down that farm to 3 of my brother-in-laws. Thanks. Can you hear me?
It's kind of quiet too.
Can you hear me now?
Built into it.
Check, check. Okay.
There you go.
So, what we've experienced in my family is, my father-in-law being able to pass the farm down to my brother-in-laws. And that's the special thing that makes, agriculture unique, that I think we really want to do everything that we can do to preserve in South Dakota. We don't want big corporate farms coming in, buying up all of our ag land and centralizing these operations. There's so much about what makes South Dakota special in our farms and in our small communities. And I think we need to look very seriously at new policies to do everything we can to incentivize and help these farms stay within their families. So that's something that we'll be looking very closely at in the future. There's a lot of pressures federally and locally, of course, and so some of that stuff, these markets are also massive, and so, there's some of that stuff is just out of our control, but anything we can do here as a culture, as a people, but also as a government, local and state, to do what we can to help family farms and pass those on to the next generation, I think that's critical. And so that's my vision for our farming communities, for our people in the state, and for how our government looks at them. I'm often reminded of our state motto, under God, the people rule. And I think some people lose sight of that in a couple of different ways. Number one, you'd be amazed that sometimes some positions in your state government where it's not about the people, but it's about these out-of-state foreign-backed corporations like Summit Carbon Solutions. And they lose sight of the fact that, our job here is to defend those people's rights. Everybody else, all the big corporations, they have their lobbyists, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You know how many family lobbyists there are in Pierre? Like 1 or 2. And so that's why I take that job as representative very seriously. I'm out there looking out for the people that I represent, those individuals, those families, those children, to make sure that they have a voice, that we, the people, have a voice in Pierre. But I also think about, the future of our state and our state motto, under God, the people rule. Sometimes people forget about that first part, under God. And so, we should always be praying about what God's will is for our own lives, for our state, and pursuing that, under God, the people rule. And if we get outside of God's blessing, or if we try to put ourselves above God, that's going to be a problem. So, we really, I think, moving forward, as Karla was saying, I think you're seeing this movement build where people are really starting to pay attention to their liberties, their rights, their duties as a citizen, and what they can do to get involved. And so that's only going to continue to grow, and to me, that's really exciting. One more thing to Mark's point, he's talking about from the very beginning to what we observed with 32 minutes of Me Too's and just the incredible amount of support. That was the case after the bill passed the Senate as well. There's a little frustration down on the second floor. That's the governor's office. They've got about 5 people in their front office, and they have various duties in the governor's office. But for those days after the bill passed the Senate and until the governor signed that bill, basically all they did was answer the phone.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's all, yeah, there you go.
So we're gonna clap
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. That's a testament to the voice of the people. And you should, it's almost cliche sometimes because people say, make your voice heard, this or that, but that is the truth. People made their voice heard, and it made a significant impact, an immeasurable but profound impact. And so please keep that up. Please stay active, because your voice, the people's voice, absolutely matters, and now it's being listened to.
So Karla, I wanted to ask you, next call to action. We've kind of tamed the beast a little bit, so to speak, in South Dakota, but I know as landowners, we're always looking at, well, how are they gonna come at us next? And on a federal level, we've seen President Trump roll back a whole bunch of things and want to pause the Green New Deal and want to kind of stifle some of these, crazy Biden agendas that really have hurt our country. There's an opportunity now, or a call to action on the 45Q tax credits. And that puts Representative Johnson in a unique position to not only vote for this bill, but co-sponsor it. So could you speak to that issue, what that bill is, and how our South Dakota delegation could maybe help the people out?
Sure. So Representative Perry, I believe he's from Tennessee, I want to say, but he has proposed a bill in Congress to roll back the 45Q tax credit, to strip that out. And so what we are asking people to do is to call your representative, Dusty Johnson, and tell him, we want you to be on board and sign on to this bill. Right now, that's what they've been asking people to do, is sign on to the bill. So, sorry. So if you can go home and do that, that would be great. I got a call from, I talked to a couple different Iowans today that have been very involved in the fight. We have really spurred them on, and because of what's happened in the state of South Dakota, they're still in session, and so they're pushing forward with some of their bills that would bring relief to their people with the same issue. And of course, our North Dakota friends, it's hard for them up there because they're kind of in the eye of the storm, if you will, and that's really it. But I did see that Doug Burgum, who is the energy czar now under Trump, a former governor of North Dakota, he is now talking about firing up the coal power plants again. And so there's a lot of shifting sand on this. I've said from day one, this is the Green New Deal. This is a fake project. We're trying to take CO2 and bury it in the ground, which makes no sense at all. And then they're going to pay them to do that with your tax dollars and mine. It makes no sense. And so if we can finally get through to the Trump team that this is a boondoggle, that it's going to be billions of wasted dollars, and if anybody has a back door maybe to Elon Musk, if you could help us out and get that message to him, maybe he'd help us out on that front too. But it just, to me, this goes against pushing this forward goes against everything that Trump is saying that he wants to do. And I'm praying that he will see this for what it is, that it is a boondoggle that's really theft and against the people, not only of our cash, our tax dollars, but also of our property. And so let's hope and pray that he does the right thing and rolls this thing back.
I guess I would just add,
I'll just add, let's open it up to questions. I will just add there are some certain, what I would deem as fake Republicans who are trying to repackage this pipeline as part of Trump's energy agenda. This is a Green New Deal pipeline. This is burying plant food, and there absolutely isn't any energy involved. So with that, do we want to go ahead and open up to questions?
Okay,
I just would like to know, because I'm stupid, what is the 45Q tax credit? In short words, what is that?
okay, well, here, I'll trade that one. Oh, Karla, you want to answer that?
And can you name that bill?
Mark, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The 45Q tax credits are on it's a tax credit from the federal government that pertains to the sequestering of carbon
So
dioxide.
it pays for that.
It pays for it.
So we
Cur-
want to, Perry's bill is to get rid of that.
Yes.
To eliminate that.
Yeah.
The tax credit's currently at $85 per metric ton.
Right.
The Summit pipeline would transport approximately 20 million tons per year. So it comes out to about $1.75 billion of taxpayer
I just
money.
wanted to make sure what we were getting. Lee Zeldin is also against all this Green New Deal stuff. The EPA, anyone knows how to get hold of him?
What's the name of the bill? Perry's?
I don't know the number of it.
I'm Dwayne.
It's on.
It's on.
It's just quiet.
I know my name is Dwayne. I understand that this carbon pipeline is connected to the Green New Deal completely. When you talk about landowners' rights, there are all kinds of pipelines running through South Dakota, oil and gas, and the water pipeline to Missouri River to Sioux Falls, et cetera, et cetera. Are you saying that when it comes to people's property rights, that no pipeline ever be put into South Dakota again?
No, actually, I'd be happy to answer that because our family just did a big project with Northern Natural Gas. That is something that you're gonna use, I'm gonna use, our town is gonna use it, our neighbors are gonna use it. That is a public use, and that is afforded to us in the Constitution. That is a correct use of eminent domain if and when needed. I will just tell you that very seldom in our state has eminent domain needed to be used for any kind of project like that because we all see the importance of that, right? Whether it's a water line or for natural gas or sometimes even oil. My family actually was part of the Dakota Access Project. We felt at the time that that was a project that it was going to be eventually, for energy independence, right? So, but carbon sequestration is taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, claiming that it's going to do something for climate change and burying it in a rock in the ground. And so that to me is not a correct use of eminent domain because it's not going to be used for the public. It's not anything that I'm going to use or you're going to use or anybody else. And it's just setting the stage for them to come in and chip away at our property rights with other things like this that are going to have a big payout at the end of the day with something like a 45Q tax credit for companies that finally were incentivized enough to do this project.
We have another question over here.
My name's Dwayne Skipper. I live here in Sioux Falls. I've watched this carbon pipeline information for a number of years, and apparently just putting it into ground is not the end result. It's going to be used for oil recovery. So the way I look at this, I'm wondering if with all these tax incentives from our US government, is big oil using that to build pipelines? They're doing it down in Texas to get it to the oil fields, and are they benefiting dollar-wise by putting those pipelines in when they apparently use water for fracking instead? I'm just wondering if there's a money incentive to just use the CO2, even though it may not do that much more to get the oil out of the ground, that they're still making money, they're getting this climate thing through. It just seems to me that oil is behind it, and I've heard that they're reusing the CO2 up in North Dakota, that they really don't need that much, so it just kind of looks like another false deal.
Well, I think you're onto something there, perhaps. I just read a column, I think it was from the American Petroleum Institute, that was critical of South Dakota for passing House Bill 1052. And it's just kind of, it's kind of funny to think about because the whole project supposedly is for lowering the carbon in the atmosphere. And then you have this oil company that comes in, and, the oil companies, I should say, that come in and say, oh, wait a second, what are you doing? We kind of want that thing. So I've heard I can only say I've heard speculation along those lines that maybe eventually the carbon would be used eventually to frack out of the oil fields. But I will say, you know, I think the current permits are only permitted for sequestration. That's it. And that's more to the point of the public use question. You know, the Fifth Amendment protects us from the usage of eminent domain unless that project is in the public use. And so when there's literally no use, I don't understand how that's in the public use. Literally there's no use, just throwing it into the rock in the ground. But I do think perhaps there's some ulterior motives or some things working behind the scenes from the petroleum industry. That's only speculation on my part at this point. Maybe others can speak to that, but I think your concern is valid, and I think you're onto something there.
We have another question.
Hi, Cal, you guys are amazing. I mean, Kathy Sullivan. I had a couple questions. First, I listened to a lot of audios and other meetings, and I'm totally blown away about what I hear, whether it be 10 Commandments, the CO2, the carbon dioxide, and in the battles. But what really amazes me is I get flyers in the mail. I'm District 12, and Archie Beal in the energy sector saying, cheer him on, man, just make sure, you know, call him, tell him what a great job he's doing. And I'm asking myself, if they could send out flyers, why can't I take and send out flyers to a district and say, do you know how your representatives are voting? I'm tired of, you know, you might be able to do a billboard, a few people might see it. Is that legal for us to go ahead and do mailers?
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to do that. I thought, you know, this next time around, I'm tired of them getting all the, I'd rather us go ahead and District 12, District 11 blows my mind away. And some of these, but I listen to the audios and then I write to some of these senators and House members. And, you know, and I'll be honest, one of them was on the RVers and things like that. And like I said, I'm a witness. I worked the election last year with the primary and the general. I saw things in the general. They asked me if I'd go downtown. I said yes, because they thought it was a pretty tough little precinct. And I think we've got a cohort up here. She understands some of that too.
Yeah.
And whether it be there were ACLU, there were lawyers, there were policemen, there was death threats on us, which it amazed me. I thought, this is a pretty radical little district. And I thought, how does an area like this in Sioux Falls have enough money where that area is buying RVs all over the place? They all have to be out of town at the same time. They all absentee vote. And the biggest, we had 2 precinct books, and the biggest one, we had 16 people in person come in and vote. I wrote all this up for her. And I said, I'm your eyewitness, I'm a testimony. And I said, I'm not degrading those people, but I said, I can't believe that there's this many people that are all out at the same time and all absentee voting, and all have the same address.
Yeah.
And, you know, but what you guys do just amazes me. But listening to the audios and stuff, I get kind of blown away. I went to the Southeastern PUC meeting, and a gentleman at the very end said something, to me it was very profound. He said, we don't have rights to our property, we are the property. What a true statement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So, I mean, I thought, I'd like to do flyers, and I thought, I don't know who to ask, but you know.
well, let's do it. I'd be happy to help you. Yeah, you know, there's a few campaign finance requirements you have to follow, but relatively easy if you know what you're doing, so I'd be happy to help you.
I would love to do that. I thought, you know, I'd love to know this stuff. I have one other question, I don't know if you can answer this one. I did ask some people, who trumps who? I love Cole back here, I pray for him all the time, because he needs it where he is. But commissioners or the legislature, who trumps who? When you guys do a law, I found out a year ago, I was pretty disappointed when I heard there was no teeth in law. Nobody abides by it, you gotta put teeth in a law. Catherine Austin Fitz taught me that. I was totally blown away on that one too.
Well, the state trumps. The state is the county is a political subdivision of the state, so the state has the ability to override county law. So that's the answer to that question. But to your earlier point, Kathy, that's another big win from this legislative session, because if you're not familiar with what Kathy was talking about, there were people from all over the country that were voting in South Dakota elections that were just straight up not South Dakotans. Yeah. We had a bill come before the State Affairs Committee one year, and we had people testifying, over Zoom, of course, because they weren't here in South Dakota. And we had one gentleman in particular, he was from Iowa. He took a federal job overseas, and he wanted us to pass this law so he could make sure that he could vote in our South Dakota elections. And so I just asked him in questioning, have you ever actually lived in South Dakota? And he said, no. And then I went to ask the other lady who was testifying remotely the same question, and she had already logged off by then.
Yeah.
And so we have had, and you look at the voter rolls,
Yep.
and it's address person after person after person after person who are just straight up not from South Dakota. And so Tony Kaiser, you all know Tony Kaiser?
I know Tony
Oh
Kaiser.
yeah, he's a great guy. Tony Kaiser and a lot of other patriots behind him passed two really important laws this year that are going to help fix that problem. And we're going to better define resident, and then we're going to say, if you're not a resident, you're not voting in local elections anymore.
How do you define resident?
How do you define resident?
Right.
Oh, good question. Well, it's in the statute, and there's a 30-day requirement. You have to have a fixed dwelling in the state of South Dakota that you intend to return to, and then there's another requirement that's slipping my brain right now that we added this year to even further tighten it, just to...
Can't somebody use somebody else's address?
That's what they're doing.
You know, the campers that sell everything in California, sell their house and everything, they buy a $500,000 RV so they can license it in South Dakota and their pickup and everything. And they go all over the place, and then they can come back and vote here like they would if they were in California. So can't they make it a longer residency than 30 days? Because 30 days, that's...
We barely got that.
Yeah.
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 This has been an unbelievable fight, and these guys can talk more to it, but having that 30-day residency requirement, and it used to be actually, it was 30 days that, like, at any, you could do 2 days here, 1 day here, and stitch together 30
And it
days
has to
and
be
call it good.
a physical address, not, not like, oh, this is my address, but it's really Kinko's. But, how do they get past that?
Well, it also comes down to our auditors and our local law enforcement to make sure that, if there are problems that are flagged, that they go and check that out and make sure that that's a legitimate voter. So there's a human element in all of this too, of course. And so I just think this year was huge on that front. We've really gained a lot of ground. It's a great win that came out of this last.
And it's carbon oxide. So I don't know exactly when they changed the name of that, but that's what I only know this government affairs committee and the Realtor Association. So trying to keep track of all these things too, but it's carbon oxide. I don't know the difference between carbon oxide, carbon dioxide, whatever, but has it really been on the books since the 80s? And if so, why have we never heard about it? Or is it because Summit Carbon brought this up and now it's forefront?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this went on the books in 2008 in the George W. Bush administration.
Okay.
And then ever since then, kind of every administration has upped the ante with how much they're gonna pay per sequestered ton of carbon. And so finally, when we got to Biden, he pushed it up enough that basically pushed these guys forward to say, okay, this is worth it now. This is worth it, and now we're gonna go after this. And what was the other part of your question?
Oh, just carbon oxide.
Oh, carbon oxide, yes. So that is what we used in the bill, House Bill 1052. That's why we used carbon oxide. Actually, John brought a very similar bill, or speakers brought a very similar bill last year, and he had used carbon oxide, and that's because that's what's used in that 45Q language. And basically, it's just that any kind of combination of carbon and oxygen molecules, I believe, is the definition of that.
I'm not a biologist.
I'm not either.
A lot of people will understand that. Yeah,
We have another question here.
Okay, my question has to do with acknowledging the public and your constituents. So I spent a lot of time in the education committees, and they have gotten better. It doesn't feel as preloaded as it has in the past, because that was clear. We were wasting our time. This year's a little better. The House Ed didn't fail to bring a show every time they met, because I think of the dynamics of the people are a little far. If we could work on Greenfield, that'd be great. How do you decide how much time? So I went from 2 minutes down to 1:30, down to a minute. And I just feel like at that point, what am I saying? Please, Lord Jesus, vote this way, the end. So I want to show respect to the committee. There's a lot of bills sometimes, and it takes a lot of time. I mean, one bill could be 1 hour. So I want to show that respect, but sometimes I feel like, okay, now you got 1 minute. I'm like, well, what am I going to say in 1 minute? And how often are my emails read prior to that? I do also just a kind of the woman, when you guys go to vote on the floor, in the House, there's a woman who will say, Lems votes green. I'm curious as why. Is she kicking that off? I'm not real sure why she's announcing that. And then just to, my experiences in the State House have always been the Senate kills it. The Senate, it goes to die. And the way you work that floor, you were calm and patient. The kill shot came after you. So much kill shot, it's the kill shot. You're like, it's not a kill shot. So I just want to, again, hats off to you for that House, that Senate floor was amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, all great questions. So I'll start with the, Lems votes aye or whatever, or, from the floor. So that's our front desk clerk. Pat Miller is her name. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She was first lady once upon a time. She was the wife of Walter Dale Miller. She's a wonderful person. Wonderful. It's so good to get to work with those guys. Okay, well, in the House, we'll vote from our desks. We have red buttons or green buttons. And sometimes, though, you might be over speaking with another member, you had to walk off the floor, and you're just coming back on the floor. So you can look over at Pat and give her a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then she'll call that out, and you can vote that way. So when you're hearing names of members getting called out on the floor while we're voting, that's what's happening. They're just not at their desk, and so they're voting from somewhere else on the floor.
And the voting machine's already been open.
Yeah. So everybody's voting.
Yes.
The voting machine is open. People can enter their votes, and that's what's happening.
Okay, I thought she was like calling people out one time. I was like, what is she
There are
doing?
times too when people, it's funny because I have this unique perspective now sitting up front, and so there are often times when a member is just maybe thinking about something else and they'll forget to vote. Because there's a lot of busyness going on the floor and stuff like that. So the vote comes up and they're just sitting there, and I can see who's voted and not voted, and I can see that member, and it's always hilarious to watch their name get called out. And they're like, oh, okay. So that's kind of a highlight of my day as speaker. To the committee question, I've been a committee chair for 6 years. I was chair of Judiciary Committee for 6 years prior to this year when I became speaker. And I always hated to have to limit testimony. People come from all over the state to testify, and it's their however many minutes to go speak what's on their heart and what's on their mind. So to have to limit that really just kills me personally. At the same time, we have no more than 40 days in our session, and the people have set that for us, and we have to live by it. And so there are some times where you come in and for one reason or another, the proponents and the opponents are only going to get 20 minutes per side or whatever, and it's terrible. I always try to, just as a chairman, I always try to manage my committee as best as I can so that I know that if there's going to be a bill that's going to be big, more of a talker, I'll put that bill maybe up with one other bill and kind of, that way I can facilitate more conversation, not have to cut people off. So as speaker, we have lots of conversations with our chairs about those sorts of issues, and we always try to be as accommodating as people as we can. Personally, I definitely do that because, like your experience, you come all the way from halfway across the state to speak your mind and to say, you only got a minute. It's like, okay, well, I can tell you about my name and where I'm from, and that's about it. And that really doesn't do the process justice. So personally, I've always tried to do my best to make sure that people have.
And it has gotten better.
Good.
Yeah.
We have another question?
Yeah, it's just kind of a fun one. I just wondered how great it felt to slam the gavel down when the group voted wrong.
That's funny. The aftermath was the most entertaining thing, really. And I feel, whatever. But yeah, because I could see what's going on over there, and I could see the reactions, and that was kind of the funniest thing. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay. thank you all for coming, and we thank our wonderful Representative Karla Lems and Mr. Speaker Jon Hansen. Thank you, and if you guys wanna ask them a question or thank them or whatever, they'll stick around for a few minutes, maybe?
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Please
Yay.
give them a round of applause.